How Kabul became an evacuation bottleneck and a prime terror target. The last 96 America's war in Afghanistan ended in calamity. Around 120,000 people were evacuated from Kabul in just a matter of days, but the herculean, if chaotic effort made the airport a prime target for a terrorist attack that killed nearly 200, including 13 U.S. service members. But exactly how did Afghanistan, a nation with a military the U.S. trained for 20 years, so quickly fall to the Taliban and instability? How did Kabul become a frenzied site where tens of thousands of people were simultaneously trying to flee the country through the same escape route? President Biden repeatedly reiterated his commitment to withdraw all U.S. troops from Afghanistan by August 31, even as the Taliban swept through the country at a speed that, according to a spokesperson, surprised even the Taliban. Biden also repeatedly blamed the Afghan army for giving up rather than fighting the Taliban once the U.S. troops began to depart. But the reality is more nuanced. The Trump administration's February 2020 peace deal crushed the Afghan government and military's confidence, according to the Afghanistan experts. When Biden reaffirmed his commitment to the deal in April 2021, morale decayed further and simultaneously emboldened the Taliban, just as the fighting season began.
It was clear that the way the U.S. treated the negotiations to depart essentially excluded as even relevant in it. Mulroy continued. The peace deal required the Taliban and the Afghan government to enter peace talks, which ultimately fell apart. The current administration had no obligation to carry through on that agreement, said Mulroy, an ABC News national security analyst. It had been violated, and they chose not to carry through on a lot of agreements of the previous administration. So, the idea that their hands were tied, I think, is just not true. Regardless, Biden announced that he would still withdraw U.S. forces from Afghanistan. What you begin to see is a crisis of confidence and a complete collapse of those institutions, particularly as this announcement is made in the lead-up to the fighting season, Ackerman continued. When that fighting season begins, we see a very intense Taliban offensive that leads to one city in one key bit of strategic terrain falling after another, culminating in the fall of Kabul in August. Taliban fighters pose for photograph in Kabul on August 18, 2021. Americans largely supported withdrawing from Afghanistan, polls conducted during the Trump administration and into Biden's presidency found, though a recent survey showed they disfavored how Biden handled the pullout. Ackerman pointed to a 2018 Rasmussen poll that found 42% either believed the U.S. was no longer at war in Afghanistan or didn't know. Mulroy noted that surveys have shown decreasing support when respondents are asked if they would favor withdrawal if it meant the return of the Taliban or Al-Qaeda. Ackerman said, "Somewhere in our American narrative, we seem to have got in our head that wars end when all the troops come home, that it's a prerequisite for a war ending. If you look historically, that has never been the case." Ackerman and Mulroy both pointed to Germany, South Korea, and Japan, all nations where U.S. forces fought during war and remained afterward. In fact, the troops only all come home when we lose wars, Ackerman said. We leave troops behind to secure peace. And that is what led to this calamitous situation in Afghanistan, he continued. Mulroy said U.S. casualties could remain low and stability could be maintained if the military kept 7,500 troops in Afghanistan. The way we set up their military had them essentially dependent on our support, he continued, specifically highlighting U.S. air operations. It was an Afghan army facing declines in both morale and air support that faced the Taliban's emboldened aggression. The Taliban rapidly seized rural territory, sometimes by force, sometimes through negotiated surrenders, giving them control over the highways and the ability to prevent supplies from reaching more fortified outposts and urban centers. It proved highly effective. The Taliban controlled 77 of Afghanistan's 421 districts when Biden announced his commitment to withdraw the troops by September 11, according to the Long War Journal. By early August, that nearly tripled to 223 districts. They were contesting another 116. And there wouldn't be air support, to stop them. While it's true, as Biden claimed, that some outposts surrendered without a fight, many others fought until their defeat. In many places, the Taliban outnumbered Afghan forces, according to raw-riot. More than 1,400 Afghan security forces were killed from May through July, the New York Times reports. But another aspect is every time we try to create a military in a mirror image force of our own, it does not do well when we withdraw our support, he added. We've designed that force to fight with a significant air component, Mulroy said. Many Afghan units had to totally change the way they fought, and they were incapable of doing it. An Afghan National Army soldier alert during an exercise near a military base. As a result, the Taliban were able to seize rural outposts, often defended by a small number of undersupplied forces who had often not been paid in weeks or months. It also gave them access to the Afghan forces' weapons and equipment. That is some of the most sophisticated in the world, now in the hands of the Taliban, Mulroy said. So, their army went from a militia, which is the one we defeated in 2001, to now one of the best equipped militaries out there. It's a shocking scenario that has played out in the worst possible way. The mounting victories and improved armaments became powerful tools when the Taliban demanded surrender. The Afghan troops also saw, of course, that the international community didn't seem to be behind them in any way or any fashion, Mulroy said. Taliban commanders would promise not to kill district chiefs and their men if they surrendered. The commanders would also often offer cash payments and even rides home to anyone who agreed. Additionally, the Taliban were leveraging Afghanistan's tribal nature. They figure out a way to deal with whichever power happens to be there, and they also have to, for their own survivability, determine when that's about to change, he continued. And I think the constant talk about us wanting to depart, the lack of any real negotiations when it came to not even including the Afghans that were the official government we've been working for 20 years, I think sent a message to the tribes that you better start looking for another alliance. The Taliban surrounded the provincial capitals but didn't begin seizing them until August 6. We started seeing the country fall, Mulroy said. We hadn't even withdrawn yet.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.